So during my sophomore year of college, a buddy of mine pitched me an idea for spring break that we should go on a 3-day, 30-mile long canoe trip. And we went, and to make a very long story short, it was an absolutely awful experience all the way around. Primarily because we didn't fully understand what a 30-mile long canoe trip consisted of. We didn't understand the difference between, say, hiking 30 miles and paddling 30. We didn't understand the difference between paddling into a headwind versus paddling with a tailwind. There's all these things that we just didn't fully understand, but primarily we didn't understand the toll that it would take on our bodies. So according to Google, the average person burns 1,600 calories after paddling for 4 hours. So we're paddling for about 8 hours a day. So realistically, we're burning about 3,200 calories, which wouldn't have been a big deal except for the fact that the guy who was in charge of buying our food tried to save as much money as he possibly could. So we are well into our first leg when we learn that he has just enough food for each guy on the trip to have 2 eggs for breakfast, an apple and 2 slices of bologna for lunch, and 1 fajita for dinner. So we are paddling and burning more calories than we've ever burned in our entire life and trying to ration apples and bologna slices just to make it to the end of the trip. We were in no way prepared for this trip, and we felt it. It was absolutely miserable. I tell you that because last week Ben talked about how we are called to be ministers of reconciliation. That because of what Christ has done for us on the cross, he has reconciled us to God and given us the ministry of reconciliation. So now our job as believers is to be messengers, to be ministers, to tell this broken world about the reconciliation that is possible. And so this month we are focusing on what it looks like to live on mission. But I want to start off by talking about the preparation for that specific mission. I think that oftentimes we kind of move into this mission idea without really counting the cost of what goes into being ministers of reconciliation. And so tonight, I want us to spend some time preparing for that specific mission. And so in Acts 17, we see 3 realistic outcomes of what happens when we step into being ministers of reconciliation. In Acts 17 is this really beautiful sermon that Paul preaches in Athens. And it's a really beautiful sermon about what it looks like to take the gospel to a people that have never heard the name of Jesus before. But we see 3 specific things take place. In verse 32, it says this. It says, "Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, and others said, 'We will hear you again about this.' So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed." So right off the bat, we see 3 specific responses to Paul preaching the gospel. Some mocked, some were intrigued, and some actually believed. And so as you and your community really engage in the mission of God, tonight we want you to spend some time really processing, are you ready to encounter any of these 3 responses? Right? Like, are you ready for people to mock you? I think oftentimes we get so intimidated by living on mission because we're not exactly prepared for people to think we're out of our minds. And the reality is, like, what you and I believe is that a dead guy came back to life, and that's pretty nuts, right? So are you ready for people to mock you? Are you ready for them to think that you are crazy? Are you prepared for that? 2, are you prepared for people to be intrigued? Are you prepared for people to ask you more questions about it? I think that oftentimes we're more intimidated by this idea of, do I have the answers to these questions? If someone wants to know more about the Christian faith, am I prepared to have a dialogue about those things? Or lastly, are you prepared for people to believe? I think sometimes we're actually really shocked when they actually believe, like, oh, that's cool. What now? Right? Like, are you prepared to enter into a discipleship relationship with whoever actually comes to believe the gospel? And so tonight in your groups, spend some time talking about, and where do I feel equipped? Where do I feel ill-equipped? And what can I do to actually better prepare for the mission of God?